Week 3, Day 7. Today's reading is taken from Genesis 38 through to 40. And it reads thus. It happened at that time that Judah went down from his brothers and turned into a certain Adullamite, whose name was Hira. There Judah saw the daughter of a certain Canaanite whose name was Shua. He married her and went into her, and she conceived and bore a son, and he called his name Again she conceived and bore a son, and she called his name Onan. Yet again she bore a son, and she called his name Shelah. She was in Chezib when she bore him, and Judah took a wife for his firstborn, and her name was Tamar. But Judah's firstborn, was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord slew him. Then Judah said to Onan, Go into your brother's wife and perform the duty of a brother-in-law there, and raise up offspring for your brother. But Onan knew that the offspring would not be his. So when he went into his brother's wife, he spilled the semen on the ground, lest he should give offspring to his brother. And what he did was displeasing in the sight of the Lord, and he slew him also. Then Judah said to Tamar, his daughter-in-law, Remain a widow in your father's house, till Shelah, my son, grows up. For he feared that he would die, like his brothers. So Tamar went and dwelt in her father's house. In course of time, the wife of Judah, Shua's daughter, died. And when Judah was comforted, he went up to Timnah to his sheep shearers, he and his friend Hira, the Adullamite. And when Tamar was told, Your father-in-law is going up to Timnah to shear his sheep, she put off her widow's garment and put on veil, wrapping herself up, and sat at the entrance to Enaim, which is on the road to Timnah. For she saw that Shelah was grown up, and she had not been given to him in marriage. When Judah saw her, he thought her to be a harlot, for she had covered her face. He went over to her at the roadside and said, Come, let me come into you. For he did not know that she was his daughter-in-law. She said, What will you give me, that you may come into me? He answered, I will send you a kind from the flock. And she said, Will you give me a pledge? Did you send it? He said, What pledge shall I give you? She replied, Your signet and your cord, and your staff is in your hand. So he gave them to her, and went into her, and she conceived by him. Then she arose and went away. And taking the veil, she put on the garment of her widowhood. When Judah sent the kid by his father, the Adullamite, she received a pledge from the woman's hand, and he could not find her. And he asked the men of the place, Where is the harlot who was at Enaim by the wayside? And they said, No harlot has been here. So he returned to Judah and said, I have not found her. And also the men of the place said, No harlot has been seen here. And Judah replied, Let her keep things as her own, lest we be laughed at. You see, I sent this kid, and you could not find her. About 3 months later, Judah was told, Tamar, daughter-in-law, Your daughter-in-law has played the harlot, and moreover she is with child by her harlotry. And Judah said, Bring her out, and let her be burned. As she was being brought out, she sent word to her father-in-law by the man to whom these belong, I am a child. And she said, Mark, I pray you, whose they are, the signet and the cord and the staff. And Judah acknowledged them and said, She is more righteous than I, inasmuch as I did not give her to my son Shelah, and he did not lie with her again. When the time of her delivery came, there were twins in her womb. And when she was in labor, one put out a hand, and the midwife took and bound on his hand a scarlet thread, saying, This came out first, but as he drew back his hand, behold, his brother came out, and she said, "What a breach you have made for yourself." Therefore his name was called Perez. Afterwards his brother came out with a scarlet thread upon his hand, and his name was called Zerah. Chapter 39. Now Joseph was taken down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the guard, an Egyptian, brought him from the Ishmaelites, who had brought him down there. The Lord was with Joseph, and he became a successful man, and he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. And his master saw the Lord was with him, and that the Lord caused all that he did to prosper in his hands. So Joseph found favor in his sight, and attended him, and he made him overseer of his house, and put him in charge of all that he had. From the time that he made him overseer in his house, and over all that he had, the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. The blessing of the Lord was upon all that he had in his house and field. So he left all that he had in Joseph's charge. And having him, he had no concern for anything but the food which he ate. Joseph was handsome and good looking. And after a time, his master's wife cast her eyes upon Joseph, and said, "Joseph, lie with me." Because he refused and said to his master's wife, "Though having me, my master has no concern about anything in his house, and he has put everything that he has in my hand, and he is not greater in this house than I am, nor has he kept back anything from me except yourself, because you are his wife, and how can I do this great wickedness and sin against God?" And although she spoke to Joseph day after day, he would not listen to her, to lie with her, or to be with her. But one day, when he went into the house to do his work, and none of the men of the house was there in the house, she caught him by his garment, saying, "Lie with me." But he left his garment in her hand and fled, and got out of the house. And when she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and fled out of the house, she called to the men of her household and said to them, "He has brought among us a Hebrew to insult us. He came to me to lie with me, and I cried out with a loud voice. And when he heard that I lifted my voice and cried, he left his garment with me and fled and got out of the house." Then she laid up his garment by her until his master came home. And she told him the same story, saying, "The Hebrew servant whom you have brought among us came in to me to insult me. But as soon as I lifted up my voice and cried, he left his garment with me and fled out of the house." When his master heard the words which his wife spoke to him, "This is the way your servant treated me," his anger was kindled, and Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined, and he was there in prison. But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him steadfast love, and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. And the keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's care all the prisoners who were in the prison, and whatever was done there, he was to do or fit. The keeper of the prison paid no heed to anything that was in Joseph's care, because the Lord was with him, and whatever he did, the Lord made it prosper. Chapter 40. Sometime after this, the butler of the king of Egypt and his baker offended their lord, the king of Egypt. And Pharaoh was angry with his two officers, the chief butler and the chief baker, and he put them in custody in the house of the captain of the guard, in the prison where Joseph was confined. The captain of the guard charged Joseph with them, and he waited on them, and they continued for some time in custody. And one night both dreamed, the butler and the baker of the king of Egypt, who were confined in prison. Each has one dream, and each dream with its own meaning. When Joseph came to them in the morning and saw them, they were troubled. So he asked Pharaoh's officers who were with him in custody in his master's house, "Why your face downcast today?" They said to him, "We have had dreams, and there is no one to interpret them." And Joseph said to them, "Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell them to me, I pray you." So the chief butler told his dream to Joseph, and he said to him, "In my dream, there was a vine before me, and on the vine there were 3 branches. As soon as I bundled its blossoms, shot forth, and a cluster ripened into grapes. Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes and pressed them into Pharaoh's cup, and placed the cup in Pharaoh's hands. And Joseph said to him, this is in the interpretation. The 3 branches are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your office, and you shall place Pharaoh's cup in his hands as formerly, when you were his butler. Remember me when it is well with you, and do me the kindness. Do me the kindness, I pray you, to make mention of me to Pharaoh, and so get me out of this house. For I was indeed stolen out of the land of the Hebrews, and here also I have been done nothing that they should put me into this dungeon. When the chief baker saw the interpretation was favorable, he said to Joseph, I also had a dream. There were 3 cake baskets on my head, and in the uppermost basket there were all sorts of baked foods for Pharaoh, but the birds were eating it out of the basket on my head. And Joseph answered, this is the interpretation. The 3 baskets are 3 days. In 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head from you and hang you on a tree, and the birds will eat the flesh from you. On the 3rd day, which was Pharaoh's birthday, he made a feast for all his servants, and lifted up the head of the chief butler and the head of the chief baker among his servants. He restored the chief butler to his butlership, and he placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand. But he haggled the chief baker, as Joseph had interpreted to them. Yet the chief butler did not remember Joseph or forgot him. This is the ending of God's holy word. We honor it by saying, thanks be to God.